This is such a on par George Kittle take, and that's one of the reasons why I love George Kittle. It's one of the reasons why I was huge on George Kittle coming out of Iowa as a tight end. But some had him as a fullback, and he actually is going to mention that. And me and him joke about it all the time. I call him a fullback constantly. I'm like, whenever he does something well, you might see me in his comments on Instagram saying, "Oh, not bad for a fullback." He's going to reference exactly why we talk about that, why I mentioned that to him. But on top of that, he talks about the philosophy that I think right now every 49er fan buys into and wants to see the 49ers make these adjustments. So take a listen as George Kittle talks about O-line, D-line, and all that stuff as he gets asked a question about a mock draft selection for the San Francisco 49ers right here.
The draft is coming up, so obviously you know that means mock drafts. ESPN's Phil Yates, he came out with the latest mock draft yesterday and had San Fran taking Ohio State's offensive tackle Josh Simmons at number 11. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you get into the mock drafts, or is there any position you're hoping the front office really prioritizes?
Whose mock draft was it?
Field Yates.
I think he does a good job most of the time. Mel Kiper had me listed as like the 5th best fullback in college, and I played tight end. So I always have a little bit of a thing for mock drafts.
Right.
Let's see. I think they're fun. The only thing like you can never really like, hey, is Tennessee going to draft somebody number 1, or are they going to trade back and then trade back again? Because like I live in Nashville, right? So I get the newspaper and all they ever talk about is the Titans. And I have different people talking about how they're trading the picks. No, they're going to trade this guy. So there's an infinite amount of mock drafts out there. You know what? I love if the Super Bowl showed anything, it's if you have a really good offensive line and a really good defensive line, it doesn't matter what the other team has. It just doesn't matter. So if your offensive line is dominant and your defensive line is dominant, it doesn't really matter. So I think that's my goal. That has always been my goal. Let's line up the 5 best guys on offensive line and with a great tight end, and let's run the hell out of the football and protect. Or on D line, hey, let's get another D tackle or someone to pair with Nick Bosa and Leonard Floyd, and let Fred Warner run a little free out there and like put less pressure on our DBs. That's always my thing, and that's kind of what's worked for us in the past. At one point in 2019, I think we had 7 first-round draft picks on our defensive line. I don't know how it happened, but it happened, and so I'd love to somehow get back to that again.
So if you guys have followed me on this channel and you've heard me talk at all about football, you know this is what I live and die by. I get that skill positions are awesome and you love to have the fastest wide receivers and the toughest running backs and all of that stuff. But to me, as a former offensive lineman, I've always been of the mindset, and I've talked about it so many times, if I ever had the opportunity to build a roster, I'm ensuring that my offensive and defensive line is the best possible before I really focus on anything else. Because as you see in this league, if you can't protect the quarterback, what good is it to have all these awesome skill positions if they don't have the time to get open, run their routes, execute the plays, and also what it looks like when your defense can't get home and your defense can't generate a pass rush and they can't stop the run. The 49ers saw what that looked like last year with their defensive line. It was one of the reasons why I went into last year saying my biggest concern about this team is their defensive line. My biggest concern through free agency was how they addressed their defensive line. My biggest concern through the draft was how they addressed their defensive line. And sure enough, their defensive line throughout last season was their biggest issue on the entire team. So here I am, yet again, campaigning the San Francisco 49ers to go out, get an elite edge, and make sure you get game changers on the interior defensive tackle. Now, they have tried. It's not, again, I think it's really important to contextualize, because I feel like people talk about like, the 49ers don't care, they don't invest, they don't try. They do. Javon Hargrave is a perfect example of that. Drafting Javon Kinlaw is a perfect example of that. They just haven't had the success that I think they would hope for. So My theory is you keep swinging until you hit. You don't stop swinging until you feel comfortable with your offensive line and defensive line. And the 49ers did a great job getting Dominic Pooney, but they need to get better. They need to improve. They need to get a better center. They need a left guard. They need a tackle of the future at left tackle. They need a tackle of the future at right tackle. So they need to keep swinging and keep going until they hit on the best offensive line they can, and also that relates to the best defensive line they can. And I know a lot of 49er fans want 49ers to draft O-line early, but as you guys have also heard me say, yes, but it has to be the right offensive lineman. You don't just draft an offensive lineman at 11 just because. No. As you guys know, I'm big on offensive line evaluation, and I do believe that there might be a target at 11, but I don't love the options. I don't think this is the strongest offensive line class. I think that you might want to trade down if you're going to try to get offensive line, and if you're going to stay at 11, you might have to go defensive end or defensive tackle, or trade 11 for a premier edge. I'm really of the mindset that you do whatever you can to rebuild this defensive line, because you saw just how detrimental it was to the 49ers defense to not have a stout defensive line. That's why the linebackers couldn't be successful, because if you don't have defensive tackles that can force double teams, then your linebackers are getting eaten up, and there's just running lane after running lane. You can't get to the passer. They're just picking you apart on the back end. So what George is saying is music to my ears. It's been my philosophy since I could remember, because I'm clearly, I come from the trenches. I'm an O-line guy. So, but it goes to the defensive line as well. So I love what George is speaking on. It's music to my ears. Now we just got to see how the 49ers address it. Let me know what you think about what George had to say. Let me know in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe from Rep. Wait, there we go. The streets are saying you might be in some negotiations. What would it mean to you to be a 49er for your entire career?
My goal is to be a 49er for life. I love wearing the red and gold. I love the support from the faithful. So it'd mean the world to me. And it'd mean nothing more than to just play my entire career for the 49ers.
Dude, I appreciate you.
And it'd be covered by you.